Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're climbing into the virtual cockpit of a very familiar aircraft, the Airbus A320. We're talking about automation surprises.
Yeah, but not the big dramatic failures you might think of.
No, this is something much more subtle, almost sneaky, a little trap hidden inside the flight management system's logic.
Exactly. It's a moment where the FMS, the brain guiding the plane's path, seems to go rogue for a bit. Everything looks fine, systems are green, but the aircraft does something completely unexpected.
Hmm.
It's what we call a behavioral anomaly. It depends entirely on a specific combination of, well, perfectly normal pilot inputs.
And our mission today is to decode one specific example, this uncommanded climb that can happen right near the top of descent, the TD. You know, you're all set for a nice, smooth descent towards your destination. You've pushed the button.
You engage DES mode.
And suddenly the nose pitches up and you're climbing.
It's jarring. The TD is that calculated point where the FMS plans to switch from level cruise flight to the descent profile. The system builds this whole vertical path, connecting cruise, descent, approach, all of it.
Right.
This particular event happens because of, let's say, a temporary confusion in how the system sees that crucial transition point. It's not a software bug in the usual sense, but it definitely catches pilots off guard.
Okay, so let's get into the weeds here. The plane should be descending. The crew wants it to descend. What's the perfect storm? What exact conditions need to line up for the A320's FMS to decide, nope, we're climbing?
Right, this is where the specifics really matter. It's not random. It requires two very precise conditions to be met at the same time. That's what creates this perfect recipe for confusion inside the vertical path calculation.
Okay, lay them out for us. What's ingredient number one?
Ingredient one is all about the initial setup data. It involves the tropopause altitude.
Okay, the value pilots enter in the MCDU, the computer interface.
Exactly. On the INAA page, condition 1 is, the tropopause altitude entered by the crew must be exactly the same as the final cruise flight level.
So if you're cruising at flight level 370, that's 37,000 feet.
Uh-huh.
And you type in 37,000 feet for the tropopause altitude, which, I mean, could be perfectly accurate based on the weather forecast.
Absolutely. It's a very logical, common input. If those two numbers match, condition 1 is met. Check.
Okay. And the second factor, you mentioned timing earlier.
Yes, spot on. Ingredient number 2 involves when you engage the descent mode. The Manage DES mode has to be selected before the aircraft physically reaches that computed top of descent point.
Ah, so you're being proactive.
Yeah.
Setting it up maybe a few miles early, a minute or two before the actual descent starts.
Precisely. Crews often do this to ensure a smooth, timely transition. Nothing wrong with that, usually.
Yeah.
But when you combine that action-engaging DES early with the first condition, the tropopause matching the cruise level well, that's when the FMS logic sort of hits a mathematical snag.
It seems so simple, though. Just make sure the numbers aren't identical. If the fix is that straightforward, why are we still talking about this? Does it point to maybe a deeper issue, like a gap in the FMS design philosophy itself? It's not a new aircraft.
That's a fair question. It really highlights the incredible complexity we're dealing with. You know, this FMS logic is built on foundations laid down decades ago. It has to manage hundreds, maybe thousands of constraints. The problem pops up specifically in how it handles the transition between flight segments when those key data points are identical.
Okay.
The system's priority is often, safety and following the computed path, even if that path in this specific edge case becomes momentarily, illogical.
Right. Let's dive deeper into that illogical part. Why does matching the tropopause to the cruise level cause this chaos? It feels counterintuitive that making two numbers the same would tell the plane to climb.
It boils down to how the system interprets the geometry, the shape of the path. When the tropopause altitude and the final cruise level are numerically identical, the FMS essentially can't calculate a normal, shallow angle to connect the cruise segment smoothly to the descent segment. Instead, it interprets that transition point as an infinitely steep vertical segment. Mathematically, it's a discontinuity.
Ah, okay. So instead of seeing a gentle slope starting downwards, it sees like a vertical line, almost like hitting a wall or needing to go straight up or down.
That's a great way to put it. It sees a cliff face, mathematically speaking.
And?
The guidance logic is programmed fundamentally to follow the required vertical path stored in its memory.
Well, even if it's impossible.
Even if it's physically impossible. When it encounters this false vertical target, this mathematical cliff, it tries to follow it. It commands the aircraft to pitch up to chase this target.
Wow.
Even though the big picture mission is still descend to destination, the immediate guidance loop gets fixated on that impossible vertical segment.
Okay, I can just picture the flight deck. You're anticipating the nose dropping slightly, maybe the engine cooling back. Instead, the aircraft pitches up, maybe quite firmly. What are the pilots seeing and feeling right then? What are the immediate clues that this isn't right?
Yeah, the surprise factor is huge. And critically, some of the standard indications can be really misleading. First, you absolutely get that uncommanded pitch up. The nose rises could be quite noticeable without anyone touching the controls.
Okay. And the engines, what's the auto thrust doing?
The autothrust, the ATHR system, it reacts immediately. It senses the pitch up and the commanded speed target, so it increases thrust, sometimes significantly.
Trying to maintain speed as the nose climbs.
Exactly. It's fighting to keep the speed up against that increasing pitch angle. But here's a key diagnostic clue. Despite the added thrust, the airspeed often starts to decrease because the pitch up is so demanding. That drop in speed while the engines are spooling up is a big red flag.
But the killer is the FMA, right? The flight mode annunciator, the thing pilots rely on to know what the autopilot is doing.
Precisely. This is the most dangerous part, the critical misleading detail. You look up at the FMA, the display showing the active autopilot modes, and it still says DES.
Still says DES.
Still says DES. So it appears the aircraft is correctly executing the descent command you gave it.
But it's not.
It's absolutely not. The outer mode label, DES, is correct, but the inner guidance loop is chasing that confused upward vertical target within the DES mode logic. The label is right, but the behavior is completely wrong.
That's the definition of an automation trap. The primary confirmation source is lying to you, effectively. How fast does this happen? How quickly do crews need to react if they see the pitch up, but the FMA says everything's fine?
It develops quickly. Because the target is impossible, the pitch command can be quite assertive. You don't have a lot of time to sit and wonder. Recognition needs to be fast and intervention immediate. Which brings us neatly to how you stop it from happening in the first place.
Yes, prevention. That's got to be the focus. How do you build in that safety margin? How do you make sure this little computational crack never even appears?
Well, the good news is the prevention is robust and actually very simple. The key really is awareness, knowing this potential exists. To avoid the unexpected climb, the procedure is straightforward. Before starting the descent, check the MCDU INITA page.
The page where you entered the tropopause altitude earlier.
That's the one. And here's the golden rule. Ensure the tropopause altitude you entered is different from your final cruise flight level by at least 10 feet.
Just 10 feet. That tiny difference is enough to sidestep this whole issue. How? Does it trick the FMS or change the calculation fundamentally?
It fundamentally changes the calculation. By adding that tiny buffer, even just 10 feet, you remove the mathematical discontinuity. The FMS can now calculate a definite, albeit very, very shallow, vertical angle connecting the cruise and descent segments. It's no longer seeing 2 points at the exact same altitude.
So it breaks the equality. It forces the geometry calculation to have a non-zero result.
You got it. It prevents the system from equating the two levels and defaulting to that impossible vertical interpretation. It's a perfect example of how literal automation can be.
Amazing. So practically, if you're cruising at FL 370,
Instead of typing 37,000 for the tropopause.
you put in 37010 or maybe 36990.
Exactly. Either one works. That tiny offset provides a huge safety margin against this specific logic trap.
Any other tips around that?
Yeah, actually. Just as an extra layer of robustness, some operators recommend avoiding entering tropopause values that end in 00, like 37, 38,000, etc.
Oh, interesting. Why?
The thinking is that a slightly messier number, like 37010 or 36990, is less likely to be misinterpreted by the system's rounding or internal processing logic than a perfectly round number. Sometimes a clean number can trigger edge cases.
Okay, so aim for slightly messy. Got it. Now let's talk recovery. Let's say you missed the check. Or maybe the situation developed unexpectedly. The plane is pitching up, airspeed might be dropping, but the FMA still stubbornly says DES. What's the immediate, calm, correct action?
Right. Immediate intervention is key to getting the aircraft back under control vertically. You've got two main options, and you need to act fast. Option 1. Immediately disengage the DES mode. Usually that means cycling the vertical mode selector knob on the glare shield. Break that specific command.
Okay, tell the autopilot stop doing that.
Exactly. Option 2, if things feel like they're escalating quickly or you're confused, use the big red buttons, disconnect the autopilot and the flight directors altogether, APFD off.
Which gives you direct manual control, back to basic flying.
Precisely. You take the computer completely out of the equation for a moment, fly the aircraft manually, get the nose down, stabilize the speed and attitude. Then, once you're stable, and importantly, once you've actually passed the top of the descent point, the transition is complete. You can safely re-engage the Manage DES mode and let the automation continue the planned descent profile.
The crucial part seems to be catching that false climb before the airspeed decays too much, while you still have plenty of energy and control authority.
Absolutely critical. Prompt recognition, prompt action.
This has been incredibly insightful. Really shines a light on a fascinating, subtle aspect of flying highly automated aircraft. Let's just quickly recap the main takeaways for everyone listening.
Sure. I think there are 3 key things to remember. First, understand what this is. It's an FMS guidance behavior, a logic gap issue. It's not a failure of the flight controls or the aircraft structure. The plane is, in a weird way, doing what the confused computer is telling it to do.
Oh, point 1. It's logic, not breakage. What's 2?
Second, prevention is simple and effective. That 10-foot offset is your friend. Always check the MCDU INITA page and ensure the tropopause altitude is not identical to the cruise flight level. Build that margin in.
10 feet of prevention. Got it. And third,
if it does happen, manage it decisively. Don't hesitate. Disengage DES mode immediately or disconnect the autopilot entirely if needed. Regain manual control, stabilize, then re-engage automation carefully.
excellent summary. And, this whole discussion really underscores a bigger point about modern aviation, or really any field, using complex automation. The human role shifts, doesn't it? It becomes less about moment-to-moment physical control and more about understanding the system's logic, its rules, and anticipating where those rules might have, well, loopholes or blind spots.
That's perfectly put. The difference between a smooth operation and a potentially serious incident can sometimes hinge on understanding a nuance like that 10-foot data entry.
Yeah.
It shows us that automation, while incredibly powerful, is literal. It does exactly what it's programmed to do based on the inputs it receives. Our job is increasingly to understand the boundaries of that programming.
So the final thought maybe for you, the listener.
Yeah, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What other subtle, logic-based 10-foot fixes might be lurking in the complex automated systems we interact with every single day? Think about transportation, finance, even online algorithms. Where might the smallest, seemingly insignificant input difference lead to the most surprising, unintended consequence? Something to ponder.
A really vital question in our increasingly automated world. Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive.